Political parties are now racing against time to constitute a government. Last week, the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that the party was seeking to form a government of national unity with a broad group of opposition parties. Now, the party has laid down stringent conditions under which parties would be included in that pact. Now, this after the ANC failed to achieve a majority in the recent elections. Now, what can South African political parties learn from the 1994 Government of National Unity in order to work together seamlessly in the best interest of the country? A former finance minister and Old Mutual chairperson, Trevor Manuel, was a cabinet minister in 1994 during the Government of National Unity, and he now joins us virtually to share his experience. Mr. Manuel, good to have you here on Morning Live. Welcome.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning to your viewers.
So just taking a look at where we find ourselves right now as a country, lots of talk about a government of national unity, and I suppose the temptation to liken it to the first government of national unity that we had in South Africa. But what are your thoughts in that regard? How is this moment different from the 1994 moment?
Thank you very much for your question, Sakina. The obvious issue is that the 1994 Government of National Unity was created by the interim constitution of 1993. It created a few clear objectives. The first was to ensure that we had an IEC that could oversee our first democratic elections. And the second was to put in place this Government of National Unity. And so it set the rules for the GNU, amongst other things. The largest parties were invited to participate. And secondly, the Government of National Unity would exist for as long as negotiations were taking place on the work for the final constitution. The constitution was adopted on the 8th of May, 1996. And very soon thereafter, within days, in fact, I think it was called the New National Party, resigned from the Government of National Unity. The Inkatha Freedom Party remained. And so the Government of National Unity came to an end, but that was time-bound. It was created for in the interim constitution. This is not the same thing. So it may have the same name, but it's not the same thing. This is an initiative by political parties to try and construct a coalition in some shape or form to be able to govern, because no single party has the requisite majorities. I think that what will also be important is that you didn't have provinces in 1994. You have provinces now, and I'm sure that the norms agreed to at national level will have to be applied to the way in which provinces are governed as well. So it's a complex issue. It has to be done by agreement between parties on an ongoing basis.
And I suppose, Mr. Manuel, one of the issues is, according to some experts, one of the main disadvantages is, of course, the potential for political instability. Now, having many parties with conflicting and sometimes contradictory positions on several policy issues can obviously become unwieldy. But how do you build a rapport and relationships across sometimes canyons of mistrust and positions that people hold on to very steadfastly? How would you suggest the parties go about breaching those chasms?
Sakina, I think the first issue is to get beyond tomorrow. Tomorrow is the first sitting of the National Assembly. Members would be sworn in tomorrow and have two tasks. The first task is to elect a speaker for the National Assembly, and the second is to elect the president for the Republic. Now, those two central positions, the president then steps out of Parliament and would no longer be a member of Parliament. But hopefully the parties would have reached agreement about what happens thereafter, what happens when they convene over the weekend and beyond, because that's when the detail of the agreement will have to be resolved. And I'm hoping that that's where attention be paid, because if a single party governs a country, then it's almost free to take to take decisions, it ought to be that Parliament exercises oversight over the executive. It hasn't happened in the past 30 years, and I can speak with a degree of experience on that. Parliament has not been strong enough. Now it's going to be different. And I think the first issue is that the government of national unity now will require a degree of maturity, political maturity, because there needs to be a higher level and a consistent discussion between parties to reach agreements. I mean, I could, as Minister of Finance, I could effectively place a budget before Parliament and get it passed. Now the Minister of Finance will have to negotiate these things, at least with the parties who participate in the government of national unity, and then be able to defend it vigorously in Parliament. So it's going to be quite different, and I think the quality of maturity is going to be the determinant of what happens. I think it's also important, Sakina, to recognize that whatever happens from here, once the government of national unity, cabinet is sworn in, Parliament begins to take responsibility, and I think that it's true, especially also in the provinces. You're not starting from a clean slate. Take any example. Let me just take the example of the state of public health in the province of Gauteng. It finds itself in a very difficult position. A new MEC, new HOD, will have to start from scratch and build the systems that will make a difference to the quality of public health care provided in the province of Gauteng. These are going to be enormously challenging issues, and the interactions between people, and I use the same example of public health, and the MEC for health, for finance in that province, and the entire relationship between that province and what happens at national level in respect of the national treasury, for instance, those become work of enormous detail, consequences would have to be considered, and ongoing discussions provided for.
And just to take that point further, Mr. Manuel, and looking at what the sixth administration has done, for example, when it comes to South Africa's foreign policy position on the Gaza, the Palestine-Israel issue as an example, how important is it going to be for these parties to show the maturity that you mentioned, but to also show ideological flexibility? So as to foster stability and drive the country forward? Because I would imagine it's not going to be an easy task to find one another on some of these issues, but how do you suggest they go about brokering some sort of middle ground on issues where they are diametrically opposed?
Sakina, I think the first issue to focus on for the government of national unity would be for those matters which affect people in their everyday lives. And I think of health, education, the quality of the infrastructure, the ability of the economy to grow and create employment. Those become fundamentally important issues. Some of them are provided for in the Constitution. I think of the preamble to the Constitution. I also think of the principles set out in the founding provisions of our Constitution, a commitment to, for instance, non-racialism and non-sexism, and I think of the Bill of Rights. These are guaranteed, and to change those, you would need a 75% majority in Parliament. So you've got to accept that those founding provisions of our Constitution are going to remain in place. And it's within that space that parties have to find each other. I think that once there's work in those areas, then other issues about which there may be differences of viewpoint are going to be less difficult to deal with. The big issues are a commitment to improve on the quality of life of all South Africans and to create the opportunities that will free the potential of each citizen. That, I think, is core, and hopefully the detailed discussions between parties over the next few weeks would focus on those kinds of matters.
And then, of course, there's also the very important issue of making every party that participates in that government of national unity, should it come to that, to feel that they are part and parcel of that government machine. Again, already we're seeing what the parties are saying in their statements through their spokespeople or other representatives. Sometimes they feel that some are bossy. Others feel that they are not appreciated enough. So how do they deal with those sorts of issues?
Sakina, I think the first issue to recognize is that, as the president said when the election results were announced, the people have spoken. And that means that the voice of the people in selecting the parties that they want to support is preeminent. Now, perhaps for whatever reason, there are some very small parties that are included in this government of national unity, and they would be leapfrogging over other parties, and I think that becomes a source of tension. But my own sense of it is that the quality of leadership that the circumstances provide for would be the test. Because you need leaders who can sit down and engage issues. You may also have to take certain positions. One of the things that I think worked incredibly well in 1994 was that President Nelson Mandela could kind of step out of the day-to-day running and allow a lot of that to be done by then First Deputy President Thabo Mbeki, and Madiba could kind of be the person who could extend his arms and focus on the issues of nation building and so on. And that's going to be an important role now as well. And I hope that they're building it in to the way in which they're negotiating, because one of the things that has come apart, and it happens very strongly in the run-up to elections, is that people describe each other as enemies. But we've got one country, one nation, one constitution, and there needs to be a very different focus on the way in which nation building happens going forward, because there needs to be a lot more accommodation of the needs of others and a lot more attention paid to the construction of common purpose for all South Africans.
And then just a final one, Mr. Manuel. Of course, the ANC finds itself in a very, very difficult position here because they've been courted to the left and to the right, or maybe it's them doing the courting. However that may be, there is going to be repercussions from whatever they decide to do here. And there are some people are even talking about possible splits. Again, maybe some resistance from within the ANC first and foremost. What's your take on that? It isn't, of course, new. We saw this even with the Nationalist Party, at points where you had the breakaway of the Herstigte Nasionale Partij and so on. These things have happened before, but for the ANC, where they find themselves right now, are you concerned that this could be another sort of breakaway in the making, depending on how they choose to go?
Sakina, I'm not competent to speak on behalf of the ANC or the internal dynamics. But if we look back at history, I think it wasn't so much the earlier breakaways of the Herstigte Nasionale Partij, but more importantly, what happened to the National Party, or the new National Party as then was, when it stepped out of the government of national unity. Effectively, it collapsed. It had, I think, utilized a lot of state resources in the way in which the party was managed between 1948 and 1996. And suddenly it wasn't there any longer, and they fell apart. And I think that is one of the major risks for the ANC. Of course, there will be disagreements with some parties, some allies of the ANC who kind of talk volubly about other parties in South Africa. They should be very careful, because perhaps they should be tested in the polls as well, and see if their voice remains as strong and resonant if the people have spoken in their case as well. I think that we've got to give encouragement to this process, see how it works through, and I think the absolute measure of the success of the government of national unity is actually what happens in the lives of the poorest of our people.
Mr. Trevor, Manuel, thanks so much for engaging us. Former Finance Minister and Chairperson of Old Mutual, sharing his experience and lessons that South Africa can take from what happened during the Government of National Unity in 1994.